At this point, we'll move to our second presentation by Larry Magin, who is a technology journalist and an internet safety advocate. And we'll line you back in, Kavaria, for the discussion after the next two presentations. So take it away, Larry.
Okay, just want to make sure everybody can hear me. Am I okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Can you hear me? Okay, good. Yeah, I apologize that I'm not able to do video, but I'm in a hotel with technical problems. Well, I actually look at this problem from two perspectives. One is in my role as CEO of ConnectSafely.org, which is an internet safety organization that does a lot of work mostly around cyberbullying. We don't really focus so much on in-person bullying, although as the previous speaker pointed out, there is often a strong overlap between cyberbullying and physical bullying. And the other role that I play in life is I'm also a journalist. I write for the San Jose Mercury News, I have a column, I write for Forbes, Huffington Post, and I'm the technology analyst for CBS News. So I'm frequently called upon by CBS to comment on technology stories, and occasionally these technology stories do involve bullying or other kinds of issues around youth, whether it's sexting, predation, other issues around youth and technology around problems. And I think the very first thing I would point out to professional media, to people in the media, whether it's print or broadcast or online, is you have a responsibility to be accurate. And that goes without saying. Everybody understands that. But accuracy is one of those things, in order to be accurate, you really have to be going to the right sources, and you have to be thinking about the information in front of you. So, for example, a lot of times we'll see stories about bullying that get blown way out of proportion. And the media will often contribute to that disproportionality, partially because it makes good copy, and partially because I think a lot of media people themselves are really not that knowledgeable on the subject. And this ranges from incidences in a school or in a community that may actually be getting resolved, but yet there is a certain amount of sensationalism that will get publicized, all the way up to the way in which you report on surveys about bullying. For example, the previous speaker pointed out that there's a range of data, 10% to 40%. Yet I have seen stories in major media outlets about a shocking epidemic of bullying or cyberbullying, claiming it's up to 85%. And when I pursue that more deeply, I find out that they're basically reprinting a press release, and the press release is quoting a study, and then when I go back and read the study, not the PowerPoint summary, not the executive summary, but the actual data points in the study, I find out that the press release put out by somebody misinterpreted it, and the media misinterpreted that, and suddenly what turns out to be 10, 15, 20% gets translated to 85% epidemic because of somebody essentially misrepresenting the data. So among other things, and I recently did an article for the Poynter Institute about this, I think that journalists need to understand how to read research. They ought to go and ask for the actual survey research and read the report and base it on that, not some summary of the report written by a PR person. And that goes for all forms of coverage, but bullying especially, because I've seen such amount of inaccuracy. The other issue, and I almost hate to bring this up because it's such a sad and often misrepresented and misreported aspect of bullying, is the connection between bullying and suicide. We do have some evidence that bullying can create suicidal ideation, yet it is not 100% clear that there is a direct relationship between bullying and suicide, certainly not every case in which the media depicts it. Yet I don't think anybody on this call has not seen a television report or a newspaper article about some poor child who's been bullied, his images or her images have gotten out in the media through sexting, and there's been a suicide. And the obvious connection is, well, they were bullied, they committed suicide, therefore the bullying caused the suicide. That may be related, it may not be related. Often some grieving relative, or parents or others will raise that issue, and of course media needs to be very supportive and sensitive to people who are grieving, who lost a loved one. But just because a loved one says that they think that their child committed suicide because they were bullied doesn't necessarily make that the case. So I think it's up to media to be a little more skeptical and not in any way demean the sensitivity of the victim parents, but at the same time not necessarily buy into that. I'm not a suicide expert, but I happen to live in Palo Alto, California, where we've had a very, very sad rash of suicides among high school students, and the media does everything it possibly can to understand it, but the bottom line is, in some cases where media has reported it's bullying or it's test preparation anxiety or it's college anxiety, we happen to know the families and know that mental health issues and lack of taking their pharmaceuticals were involved. That doesn't get out in the public, but the media jumps on the obvious thing. So be very, very careful, and definitely avoid the word bullicide or cyber-bullicide. We just don't know why this tragedy happens. I think, you know, one of the things I'm looking at right now is cyberbullying.gov has, or bullying.gov, excuse me, has an excellent FAQ for journalists and a lot of really good information that I urge anybody in media to take a look at about using nuanced, accurate journalism to things to avoid overstating the problem. Again, what I had just said, avoid overstating that bullying causes a suicide, oversimplifying issues related to a bullying incident, making sure you're using qualified sources, and also, of course, avoiding sensationalism or blaming and criminalizing the bully. So there is this tendency in the media to vilify bullies, to almost elevate it to a criminal act. And while that can be the case, and while there are cases that we all know of where people have bullied in some extreme and incredibly harmful ways, the vast majority of it is peer-to-peer aggression. And even the term bullying is often misapplied. We have a tendency to call any kind of term peer-to-peer aggression or harassment bullying when often it doesn't meet the research, generally agreed upon researchers' definition of bullying, which I can't remember all of the factors, but one is power imbalance and the other is repeated and aggressive. So don't assume that every time somebody is not nice to somebody that's bullying. So we have to put things in context. It's very important that we don't over-exaggerate these problems. Also trying to avoid fear-based messaging. Again, it gets down to these statistics when creating this notion that young people are just a generation of horrible human beings that bully each other. The reality is, based on the research that I read, that bullying is actually slightly on the decline, that it is not getting worse, that it is not an epidemic, that it is a problem, of course, but it's not as if it's a sudden problem that emerged through the advent of the media or social media or technology. It's been around forever, and there's evidence that it actually may be getting better, not worse. Even cyberbullying, which again tends to be exaggerated. I hear all these stories about, nothing was really horrible until the internet came around, and now we have this epidemic of cyberbullying. Actually, most of the research that I look at says that cyberbullying is significantly lower than in-person bullying, not the other way around. That far fewer children are bullied online than are bullied in person. And there's a recent study that came out suggesting that the consequences of cyberbullying tend to be less severe than the consequences of in-person bullying, even though there are all these theories out there that cyberbullies will follow you around the internet 24/7 and people will pounce on it. There's all the things people say based on what can happen and what may sometimes happen, but doesn't necessarily happen, and statistically is actually less likely to happen than a lot of the journalistic reports indicate. So again, I would urge people to read the research. I know very few people have time to go through and read all of it, but go to the Cyberbullying Research Center, go to our own site, Connect Safely, and read some of our summaries of the research. Look at the work of the Crimes Against Children Research Center that's done a number of important studies. Some of the people like Michelle Ibarra. There's a number of people who've done some good research, and some of them are probably on this call. In fact, I know some of them are on the call. And I would really urge journalists or anybody who's reporting on it to reach out to these professionals and to avoid those who pander, who try to use fear to enhance their own reputations, get their own television attention, raise money. They're not helping, really. By exaggerating the problem, they're actually probably hurting more than they're helping. So it's just like any other good journalism, accurate, good sources, well-balanced. But unfortunately, in today's media market, that's not always going to happen. because you know, you don't read headlines about all the planes that landed safely yesterday, and there is that old saying in journalism that if it leads, it bleeds. So there's going to be that tendency, but I would urge responsible journalists to try to avoid that. And that's pretty much summarizes my remarks.
Great. Thank you very much, Larry.